A wise man once said the best superpowers always come in threes. Never mind, I just made that up a second ago. But across history, three dominant forces, rivals, or legends have always risen together to define their era. Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar. Nintendo, Sony, Sega. Mercedes. McLaren and Porsche. These three automotive giants pushed the boundaries of innovation, but amongst them, the Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR stood tall. A car that was so good, it killed the entire GT1 class of the FIA GT Championship. Mercedes-Benz made a car that redefined speed, and here is how they did it. 99 FIA GT Championship winner. The story begins with the McLaren F1, which was never meant to be a race car. You've probably heard this story before, otherwise you must be living under a rock. But we will go over the F1 a bit to fulfill all righteousness. It starts with Gordon Murray and his dream to build the ultimate road car, which led the F1 to becoming the fastest production car in the world when it debuted. But no matter how good it was, the F1 was never supposed to race. McLaren wasn't interested in motorsport at the time, at least not with this car. That changed when private teams convinced them to build a competition version, the F1 GTR, and it didn't take long for it to dominate. When it entered the BPR Global GT Championship, it won easily. The other cars just couldn't keep up. From there, the McLaren F1 GTR set its eyes on greater heights. Le Mans 1995. Against other race cars, the McLaren F1 won on its very first try. Not only did it take first place, but three other F1s finished in third, fourth, and fifth. The world had never seen a road car succeed like this before. Porsche, one of the biggest names in endurance racing, couldn't ignore what had happened. The McLaren F1 had embarrassed everyone, including them. Up until that point, the 911 had been Porsche's weapon of choice for GT racing, but it simply wasn't fast enough to keep up. Instead of trying to upgrade what they had, they did something drastic. They created a whole new car just to beat the McLaren. The Porsche 911 GT1 was born out of frustration. Unlike every 911 before it, this one didn't have an engine in the back. Instead, Porsche took a 911, cut it in half, and stuck the rear of their Le Mans prototype, the 962, onto it. The result was a car that looked like a 911, but was really something much more advanced. It had a mid-mounted engine, a lightweight body, and a twin turbocharged flat six that made it brutally fast. When it hit the track in 1996, it was immediately a threat. It won its class at Le Mans that year, but didn't take the overall victory. Still, it had proven its point. The McLaren F1 wasn't untouchable anymore. But behind the scenes, Mercedes sat quietly watching all of this unfold. The dominance of the Porsche 911 GT1 and the McLaren F1 GTR sparked a wildfire at their headquarters. Mercedes-Benz wanted to dominate endurance racing, but they needed the right car to do it. So their in-house performance division, AMG, was given a challenge. Build a machine that could take on the best, like Porsche's 911 GT1. And the result was the CLK GTR. Despite its name, it had almost nothing in common with the regular Mercedes-Benz CLK. The only things it shared were the headlights, taillights, and grille. Everything else was designed for pure speed. But time was not on AMG's side. They had just 128 days to develop the car. While most people were preparing for the holidays, their team was locked in the factory. If Mercedes wanted to compete, they had to come up with something even better. But there was almost no time to do it. The 1997 racing season was just a few months away. That meant Mercedes had only 128 days to design, build, and test a brand new car before it hit the track. Normally, designing a race car took years. Even modifying an existing car took longer than that. 4 months? It seemed impossible. but Mercedes had no choice. They had to make it work. Since starting from scratch would take too long, the engineers needed a shortcut. They had to work fast, and the best way to do that was by looking at what already existed. The McLaren F1 GTR had been one of the fastest cars in endurance racing. It had won the 24-hour of Le Mans in 1995, and it was still a serious threat on the track. Mercedes decided to use it as a learning tool. Instead of studying it from afar, they got their hands on one. Chassis number 11R. They took it apart, piece by piece, removed the body, studied the aerodynamics, and examined how the suspension worked. Threw out the McLaren's BMW engine and replaced it with their own Mercedes V12. What they had now was something between a test car and a Frankenstein monster, a McLaren body with a Mercedes heart. For months, this modified McLaren was driven hard. It was tested at high speeds, pushed to its limits, all so that Mercedes could learn everything they needed before building their own car. But they couldn't keep it forever. People were watching. If McLaren found out what they were doing, there would be trouble. So after it had served its purpose, the car was crashed, rebuilt, and quietly sold to keep their secret safe. By that point though, Mercedes didn't need it anymore. They had everything they needed to build their own machine. With time running out, the engineers got to work. Their new car had to be faster, stronger, and more reliable than anything else on the track. It had to handle like a dream and be built for endurance, but it also had to follow the rules. To compete in the GT1 class, the car had to be based on a real road car. That meant Mercedes had to produce at least one street-legal version of it. They named their creation the CLK GTR. It was built low to the ground with an aggressive aerodynamic shape and wide fenders that hugged the massive tires. The car's frame was made of lightweight carbon fiber, which helped it stay both strong and fast. Under the hood sat a 6.0-liter V12 engine, producing over 600 horsepower. The car had so much power that it could blast from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 3 seconds, and reach speeds over 200 miles per hour. But designing a car and racing it were two very different things. Building something in the lab was one thing. Winning on the track against Porsche and McLaren was another. Mercedes needed a team that could handle this monster of a machine. They partnered with AMG, their long-term performance division, and enlisted drivers who had experience with endurance racing. One of them was Bernd Schneider, a highly skilled German driver who knew how to push a car to its limits. When the CLK GTR finally hit the track, it was clear that Mercedes had built something special. At the first race of the 1997 FIA GT Championship, the car wasn't quite ready to win, but it showed potential. By the time the season was in full swing, Mercedes had worked out the issues. From that point on, they dominated. The CLK GTR won 6 out of 11 races that season. It wasn't just winning, it was crushing the competition. Porsche and McLaren, the previous kings of endurance racing, were suddenly struggling to keep up. Bernd Schneider became the GT1 champion, and Mercedes had proven that they could build a race car in record time and make it unbeatable. But Mercedes wasn't done. In 1998, they returned with an upgraded version of the CLK GTR. This new model had a bigger engine, pushing it to 7.0 liters and even more horsepower. The car had been fine-tuned, making it even faster and more reliable. And once again, it dominated the season. Mercedes won every single race except for one, taking home the championship again. However, not everything was perfect. The CLK GTR was too good for its own good. The FIA decided that cars like the CLK GTR had gone too far. They weren't really road cars anymore. The class had become a battle between manufacturers building near prototype race cars with road car badges slapped on them. By 1999, no other team wanted to challenge the CLK GTR in the GT1 class of the FIA GT Championship. With Mercedes as the only competitor, the class was scrapped. In a way that mirrors Formula One in the 2010s, Mercedes showed up, dominated the competition, and effectively ended the category. Just like that, the CLK GTR had nowhere to race. The car had been designed to compete in a category that no longer existed. Mercedes didn't want their masterpiece to disappear without a trace, so they did something special. To meet the racing rules, they had already built one road-going CLK GTR in 1997, but now they decided to produce a few more. They made 25 street-legal versions, each costing over $1.5 million. These were some of the most extreme road cars ever built. They looked almost exactly like the race car, with only minor changes. The engine was slightly toned down, and the suspension was adjusted to make it somewhat more usable on normal roads. Still, calling it a road car was a bit of a stretch. It was loud, uncomfortable, and barely street legal. But that didn't matter. These cars were legends, built for collectors who wanted a piece of history. While the CLK GTR's racing career was short, its impact was massive. It showed the world just how fast Mercedes could work when they put their minds to something. In just 128 days, they had built a car that could take on the best and win. It forced other manufacturers to rethink their approach to racing, and it became one of the most iconic endurance cars of all time. Even today, the CLK GTR is remembered as one of the most insane machines ever built. It was a car born out of desperation and speed, created in record time, and then forced into retirement just as quickly. But for the brief moment it was on the track, it was unstoppable. While the CLK GTR crushed its competition with sheer power, the M3 E30 took a different approach. To see how the M3 E30 became a motorsport icon, click on the video showing on your screen.